Welcome everyone to another episode of Diversitas. Diversitas is a podcast at the crossroads of diversity, business, and culture. Today, we are so happy to have Kyle Darby. Kyle is the president and CEO of Darby Public Strategies, which is a bipartisan business and consulting firm. Throughout his career, Kyle has been very impactful in assisting clients in all types of areas, including real estate and construction, healthcare, entertainment, professional sports, cannabis, etc. He has been, he's had his fingers on the pulse of a lot of different places. He's very impactful. He's well respected despite his young age, which can often act against people. And so I wanted to talk to Kyle today about what's going on in Philadelphia, particularly in the world of politics. So Kyle, we welcome you today. Welcome to Diversitas.
Thanks for having me.
So for the uninitiated, can you tell us what Darby Public Strategies is?
Sure. So I essentially act as a middleman between my clients and the state, federal, and local government. I mostly do work here in Philadelphia, in the State House of Pennsylvania, in the State House of New Jersey, and down in DC. So whether a client needs money from government budgets, whether they need support letters for whatever initiative they're looking to undertake, whether they just need to engage in some relationship building with elected officials, I serve as a conduit, and I'm a one person team, so it's fun in that way that I get to kind of be creative as opposed to other folks that do this that are on larger teams. I've been on larger teams, but I've been running this company for a little over 3 years now, so it's been good.
What makes a lobbyist an effective lobbyist? A lot of people have, I know a lot of people that don't make me a lobbyist. So what makes a lobbyist an effective lobbyist?
I think there's two ways to answer that. One, I think there's a level of you being registered to lobby, because I think a lot of folks, call themselves lobbyists or consultants and, may not be legally registered to represent clients within whatever government body. Mm-hmm. I'd say in terms of effectiveness, someone who pushes the needle. I always tell clients nothing is guaranteed in terms of what the ask is. Obviously you can't make elected officials do anything, but you can certainly push the needle. If there's a larger task or request, you try to get as close to that task or request and completing that. Sometimes you're not going to be able to complete it, or sometimes you're not going to be able to push that needle a little bit, but I think it's just progress, being able to place a client in a position where they weren't before hiring you.
How does the client know, besides ultimately getting what they want, right? Because at the end of the day, I guess you're doing this to give people what they want or what they need in their business or what have you. But other than that, how does a client know that you are effectively advocating for them?
I think it's metrics. So, I always like to, have conversations with my clients very early on and, in an engagement and say, look, what are your goals? What does success look like for you? Whether that's getting X amount of money from, a budget, or, building a better relationship with, elected official X or elected official Y, or, placing that particular company or organization in a better light in the public eye, whether that's media, or being invited to sit at the table for larger conversations regarding that particular industry. So I think being very deliberate and intentional with clients, from day one, and saying, hey, what are your goals, and what does success look like for you, so that, every day throughout this engagement, we're able to place some metrics on the level of success that we're having.
What's the biggest misperception that people have of lobbyists?
I think the largest misconception or misperception, I think, is that we're just these evil people that essentially act on behalf of terrible, interests, people that, are within, industries that, are doing harm to the environment or doing harm to the communities. I mean, there's definitely people that exist like that. I'm sure you and I know a few of those people, but I think the biggest misconception and misperception is that, we're all that way. I like to consider myself to be, a social impact lobbyist, if you will, meaning.
Well, and how do you define that?
So issues that, really impact communities in a positive way, whether that be, economic development for communities, whether that be, enhancing educational opportunities, whether that be, enhancing access to healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. I like to focus on those issues because those are the issues that hit home for me, in my upbringing and the things that I care about. I've certainly been involved in conversations with some industries and interests that, aren't necessarily considered good at times, but I always try to make sure that, communities that are, impacted in a negative way or don't have access, or just quite frankly have been ignored, are always, at the table when I come into the room.
So, everybody, I mean, people get into politics for any number of reasons, right? Some people want to be rich. I don't know why you would get into politics to want to be rich, but some people want to be rich. Some people want to be famous. Some people want to feel like they're connected. Why did you, what interested you in this whole political world and into becoming a lobbyist?
Yeah, I think I think there's a lot of ways, right, to make money in this world, finance, banking, real estate, you name it, tech. I've always had the mind that, there's something more valuable and more powerful than money, and that's influence, and being able to, have conversations with people that are decision makers in this world. You don't necessarily have to have millions in your bank account or hundreds of thousands in your bank account to do that. When I came into this space, that it actually was, very surprising to me. I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing today, at all. But, throughout the years, I've found that, this space can be incredibly impactful. I've helped family members with things. I've helped friends with things. Being able to just, quite frankly, just access the government in a different way, and being able to provide advice to folks' businesses, different issues that they had during the pandemic. I was helping people with their unemployment, helping people with, their loans to help survive the pandemic with their small businesses. I mean, the level of, impact and influence that you're able to have in this space, to me is unparalleled. And I think that, for me, that's the best part about it, is that, I'm not the richest person in the world. Certainly I do well for myself, but for me, it's being able to call, any elected official that I have a relationship with, and, if they can be helpful to someone that I know or someone that I represent, that they'll pick up the phone and help in any way they can.
In terms of issues that you tackle on a day-to-day basis, what are your kind of favorite issues to dig your teeth into as a lobbyist?
Sure. So I'd say nonprofits. I love dealing with nonprofits. I've represented larger companies, Fortune 500 companies before, and that's great and cool. And like having the name and having, that access to some of their information and the things that they're doing. But nonprofits for me are some of the best people to work with, because they're actually engaged on an issue in a real way. There's actually, some level of passion there, in terms of the work that they're trying to do. My favorite types of organizations to work with are like economic development organizations that deal in education, whether that's K through 12 or higher education, organizations that, are dealing with criminal justice reform, those types of organizations that have a direct community impact, especially for Black and Brown people who have been, underserved and misrepresented for many years. I just enjoy working, on behalf of those organizations, because you can actually, tangibly see some of the impact and results of that work.
It's interesting because most people, I mean, I don't think it's common when you think of lobbyists as having lobbyists represent those particular kinds of organizations on a regular basis, right? When you think of a lobbyist, you think of somebody who's representing, a Fortune 500 company, a Pepsi or or a Comcast or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, is there a sizable market in that particular area for
Yeah,
lobbying services?
absolutely. Part and parcel because, as you know, nonprofits aren't, established organizations as it relates to finances, unless they have, a wealthy board, or, some donors that, continuously kick in dollars. 9 times out of 10, that nonprofit is not going to have the resources to be able to complete their mission or even push that mission a little bit further along. So one of my favorite things to do, and where there really is a market for that type of work, is helping some of these organizations get government dollars, specifically government grants, and helping specific projects that they have, or specific goals that they have within that calendar year, helping to find some money, quite frankly, and help them to kind of facilitate some of their goals, and use those resources for some of their projects is really fulfilling. And there definitely is an abundance of organizations out there that need it.
All right, let's turn the page a little bit. I wanted to first of all, before I start asking these questions, are you comfortable having like a candid conversation about what's going on in the mayor's race?
Absolutely.
Okay, because there's a lot going on. There are a lot of people in it. So have you publicly voiced support for any one candidate?
No, I haven't. I've been holding off. I know we're close to the primary, but I've been holding out. Not that my endorsement or support of a candidate is super important to anyone.
Right. I'm sure people would love your support.
I'm sure folks would be happy to have it, but for me, I want to hold out as long as possible, because I think this is probably the most important mayoral race probably in the history of this city. It's
Tell me why.
I mean, we can just start with the number. I mean, this is going to be the 100th mayor of this city.
Okay, I knew that.
We're obviously going through one of the darkest times in the history of the city in terms of public safety, specifically with gun violence.
Right.
Obviously, it touches everybody that lives in this city one way or another.
Right.
Some of these tragic stories that we hear. And there's a variety of other areas, whether that be the economic outlook of the city, and it's still being the largest city in America, but still the most impoverished city in America per capita. There are just so many issues, I think, that are coming to a head here in 2023 in this city, and I think that the next mayor is going to have a lot of tasks to undertake, and I think that quite frankly, this is going to lead us into the next 10 years. Because I think a lot of people don't think about, whether that's on the state, federal, or local level, elections, they have implications for years beyond,
no question about it.
Of when someone gets elected. It's not just, a 2 or 4 year experience. It's, it's able to be impactful for a decade, at least, especially in this city, which is widely Democratic city. Most mayors, if you didn't do an absolute terrible job, you usually get reelected for a second term. So I think
sometimes you can do a terrible job and still be reelected.
Indeed. So I think look, I think this is the most important election, probably over the last few decades in this city. And I think that whoever will be gracious enough to receive the mantle, I think they're going to have a lot to tackle during this time.
So handicap the race for me. Who are the favorites? Who are the dark horses? And who has less of a shot than most?
I think some of the favorites, and there's been polls out, and I'm sure there'll be probably a few more.
I've seen one poll. Have you seen more than one poll?
I've seen about 3 or 4 polls, some that are reliable, some that aren't. I can tell you that, some of the favorites have been, Helen Gim, Jeff Brown. Those 2 names have kind of been circulated a little bit more than the others. But, I have a relationship with pretty much every single one of them. I think that in their own right, I think all of the candidates, I think it's 9 or 10 candidates now. I think all of them have something to bring to the table. Not to say that, I have a particular candidate at this time, but I think that some of the folks, may have been better left on council in the private sector doing something for one of our leading institutions. I don't always think that being elected is a prescription for that particular skill set, that person has. I think to be impactful. I think, quite frankly, some of the folks in the race probably, are thinking of this from more of an ego perspective than actually helping the city and fixing the city, and being, really
some of the bigger names, or like, there's some, like a couple of fringe types in the race right now.
Yeah, I'm
not talking about the fringe.
Yeah, I don't want to disparage anyone. I think that some folks, quite frankly, have some sort of, inclination that they're probably not, in the lead per se. I think that there are some folks, again, who, probably can go do other things a lot better. But look, this is a race in which all of their names will be on the ballot. You don't necessarily have to do, all that well. You don't have to get 99% of the vote. You only have to get, a certain percentage. And each camp has their, they do their calculus.
Everybody has their path that they believe that they have to the mayor's office. So let me give you my 2 cents, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. To me, when it shakes out at the end of the day, there will be 3 candidates that are the true favorites to win this race.
Yeah.
First candidate is Jeff Brown, based upon what he's done thus far in terms of being up on TV, the message that he has, the endorsements that he has, the fact that he owns supermarkets in primarily Black areas, so people know him. And then the second, I think, major candidate is Helen Gim, who is the progressive darling, has obviously all of the support of the Progressive Caucus, and she has won citywide twice. So she's going to have something to say about this race. And then the third one would be Sherelle Parker. And I'd say Sherelle Parker primarily because of the fact that we're talking about a race with 9-10 people in it. And she has a fairly strong grip on, number one, her ward, which is one of the, best wards in terms of voting in the city, and then the Northwest in general. Now, I think that Derek Green will cut into her numbers in the Northwest. I think that Jeff Brown will probably cut into her numbers in the Northwest. But I would put her as the third person in that mix. Everybody else, I just don't see their path.
Yeah.
I can't see their path.
Yeah, and the thing
I could be wrong, but I don't. So what's your take on my take?
No, I think that's right. I think in terms of if we were to establish a top 3, I think that's probably it. I think, to your point, I think Derek and Sherelle are probably interchangeable in a certain way. But I'll speak on Sherelle because I think we kind of get the sense of what the pathway looks like for Helen and Jeff. But I think another thing about Sherelle is the experience, right? She's been in the state house. She is a ward leader, so she understands, Democratic city politics better than most and has those relationships. She serves as the chair of the DRPA, which obviously gives her, relationships and connections in New Jersey as well. Obviously have certain influence in these types of things. And then, quite frankly, it's just all of her years in council. I mean, she was not, by any stretch of the imagination quiet in those chambers.
Right.
She was very, outwardly supportive of a ton of issues, got a great deal of bills passed in council, some of which that are still impactful today, such as like a community benefits agreement. I know that that's something that's still implemented in this city. So, in terms of experience, and being able on day one to, seamlessly integrate into the mayor's office, I think, she might be more primed than Helen and Jeff, quite frankly, in that aspect.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, she has substantial experience in government. both at the state level and at the city level. Some would say she probably would be better as the new what do you call them in council? Do they call what are they? President, yes. The new
Yeah,
president, you know, I've heard that in the past that
yeah.
she
I
might
think
have.
there's some other folks that, obviously, Curtis Jones and Kenyatta Johnson are probably vying for council president. Obviously,
Now it would have been hers if she would have
yeah,
stayed in.
yeah, if she would have stayed in. But look, I think, that's what happens when you're somewhere so long, right? When you're in a legislative body for so long, I think you get a little tired of it. You
Yeah,
get
no, I
tired
get that.
of politics. You get tired of having to, support your colleagues' legislation so that they'll support yours. I mean, you just
Right.
kind of get tired of the game. So I understand that. But I venture to say she probably would have made a really great council president as well.
Oh yeah. No, I believe so. But you know, she can be a great mayor, there's no question. Um, you know, it's interesting that it'll be interesting to see how this really I really have no idea who's going to win this race.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does. And if they say they do, I don't think they truly know. I don't think that I think that we both underestimate the electorate of this city. And I think that we also overestimate them in a lot of ways. I think that, we tend to kind of go off of personality. I think that's kind of speaking to the larger political climate of where we're at. I think people
Yes.
go off of personality and
Right.
whether they like this person and how they speak and how they interact with people. I think that has become a little bit more impactful in terms of folks that quite frankly aren't in the political realm, at least in their day jobs, think about these candidates. And I think that ultimately whoever can kind of tap into that school of thought a little bit, I think is going to have a lot of success. And I probably, based on you saying that, Jeff being on TV and all that, I think that he's going to.
I think that has. So when this race started, I'm trying to think. So it was before Christmas, and I had to go to some event, and I think that event was in, I think, the first week of December. And one of the candidates came to the event. Now the event was for, I forgot what it was for. It was like an award, something or whatever. But there were no, I was like, I mean, there was like, I might have been the only Black person in the room. So the candidate comes in. This candidate has, one of those people with him that candidates kind of walk around with. So, the person that is with this candidate comes to me and says, hey, who are you? Blah, 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 blah. This person who's talking to me looks like us. And so, I tell them who I am, what I do, whatever. So what do you think about the mayor's race? So I'm like, well, look, I think your candidate has as good of an opportunity as anybody else, but I think your candidate should probably be up on TV sooner rather than later. That candidate did not go up on TV sooner rather than later. And that candidate and every other candidate basically ceded the ground to Jeff Brown for how long was Jeff up before anybody else went up?
Not that long. I want to say about officially a month and a half, but I think
that's long in a campaign, dude. That's long.
But I think it was during a time where people really weren't paying attention because
but see, that's where we get ourselves into trouble because he basically did what Wolf did.
Sure.
Wolf did the same thing.
Yeah.
Right?
That's fair.
Wolf was like, I need people to know who I am right now because people don't know who I am. So let me put these kind of hokey commercials on. He Brown has taken a lot from that Wolf playbook, right? Even to the point of if you do a comparison of their commercials, even the font that they use in the commercials is the same or similar to the font that they use in the Wolf commercial. So I guess my point is, to me, you know, the ground was ceded to Jeff Brown for, I think, a little too long,
Sure.
where he really gave himself the opportunity to introduce himself to the electorate that other people didn't do.
And I think it's in a different way too, because, you know, he's a businessman. He's not, you know, necessarily connected to these political circles. He's not a
Right.
politician. So the way that he, you know, had to come out, quite frankly, and Wolf wasn't a politician, right? So
No,
there is a lot of similarities there, and being able to
the difference is Wolf was Wolf, and this is not to say that Jeff Brown, I mean, he could be the most brilliant man in the world. But in terms of his background as an academic, and I think he was a political scientist, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And then his experience in the Rendell administration, I think that at the time that Wolf got into the race, he knew a little bit more about government,
Yeah,
than Jeff Brown knows right now.
yeah. And for better or for worse, right? Like that could really hurt Jeff, or that could really help him.
Yes.
I think that, you know, I hate to bring it up, but I think that's where the Trump appeal comes in, right?
Oh, there's no question.
They didn't really care whether or not he had
There's no question.
They wanted something fresh and something, you know, a new perspective to look at things. And I think that that's, you know, that's what Jeff presents in this particular race.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on with that. And truthfully, I mean, let's just say I happen to find myself at one of these events recently, and there's a level of imprecision to the messaging, to his messaging, that reminds me of Trump.
Okay.
And that's not to disparage them at all, or disparage Jeff Brown at all. It's just, there's a difference, I believe, when you come from government or have some history with government and when you don't. And just the way you talk, you know, if you're not well versed in it, and that's the other piece of it. I don't know how, you know, it's kind of like, you know, trying to drink water from a fire hose. So I understand that there is going to be some level of stuff that he just doesn't know. But at the same time, just, you know, he could be coached up by his staff in a way that would suggest that he knows more than he does. And I don't know whether that's happening right now in terms of.
Yeah, I know, you know, there was a forum that Mayor Nutter helped moderate. And
I heard about it. I didn't see it, but I heard about it.
There were some questions regarding, you know, what does the administrative board, right? You know, what does this particular office do, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, Jeff didn't necessarily know the correct answers to those.
Right. Right.
But I don't think that disqualifies.
No, it doesn't. No, absolutely, it does not. Absolutely, it does not.
Whether or not, you know, you've had council experience or experience within City Hall, I think there's a lot of things that they just quite frankly won't know. I mean, one of the questions was like, have you read the home rule charter, you know, front to back? And it's like most of the council members who were there for 10 plus years hasn't read the home rule charter front and back. So
no question.
That was an unfair question, but, you know, I think quite frankly, moms that have lost their sons and daughters to gun violence
don't care.
Families who are going through it and can't make ends meet, they don't care about that.
They don't care. They don't care. You know, I look at, so I will tell you that my mother hasn't said who she's going to support. And my mother, to me, is the quintessential Philadelphia super voter, right? Older Black woman, reads the newspaper religiously every day, and votes in every election, no matter what. No matter who's running, whatever, every 2 years or every year, whatever it is, she's voting. So she hasn't said out and out, I'm voting for Jeff Brown. but she hasn't poo-pooed it either.
Yeah.
She hasn't poo-pooed it. Whereas she has said out loud, I don't like this other person who's running.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend who lives in West Philly who, lives down the street from one of his ShopRites, and, he's not very, politically, astute or involved, but, he's like, this guy's getting in the race. Oh, everybody else is going to have a rough time, because when you can literally say that you've fed people and you've provided, an opportunity to be able to, get quality, groceries in a food desert. I mean, there's not really much you can compete with in that conversation.
Yeah.
Especially.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, if Sherelle can get her vote out, I think she has a great shot. Because I don't know whether you need more than I don't know, dude. I don't know whether you need more than 50,000 votes to win this race. I don't know.
You really don't. I think, you can probably talk to all of the analysts and folks that are crunching all the numbers, but what I'll say about Sherelle is I think, what'll dictate whether or not she does well is her relationship with the business community. I think, a lot of what she's done, though, in many respects, it's been good pieces of legislation. I think, you'll have the argument from the other side of the business community, particularly the real estate and construction community, who would argue to say that she's making development, more difficult, or she's placing more barriers, in development in particular areas. And she, quite frankly, I think she's right in some respects, but I think, how you message that and how you involve yourself and build a relationship with the business community at large, not just real estate and development, I think is really important in the city, because they have access to dollars to donate to campaigns.
Let's put a pin in that for a minute, because I'm putting a pin in that because there is a candidate that I do believe would be attractive and is attractive to the business community. But before we talk about him, let's talk about, and I'm not talking about Alan Dime. And when we talk about him, before we talk about him, let's talk about Helen Gim for a minute.
Sure.
How do you think she can win?
I think her pathway is very different than everyone else, not just because she's, as you call it, the progressive, what was the word that you used?
Darling.
Yeah. Look, she does not have to get particular communities, right? She doesn't have to look at particular wards and say, we need this ward over others. She doesn't have to necessarily be involved with, the Northwest in a way that Sherelle and other folks have to be involved. She's just got to get all of the progressives from each pocket of the city in which progressives live in to vote for her. And that's a message that I think it's a difficult feat, right? Because you're only as good as your street team. And being
right.
Message out, and I think TV would help her a lot.
Yes.
But I think that her calculus and pathway is much different, because she doesn't have to do, the politicking, so to speak, in terms of certain endorsements and having certain conversations
right.
with communities and neighborhoods, because there's progressive people throughout the city.
Well, she has been endorsed by somebody, hasn't she? Has anyone endorsed her?
Yeah, the Working Families Party just endorsed her recently.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I don't know. You know better than I as to what kind of weight that carries. I don't. What kind of weight does that carry?
Look, I think, the city is, as you know, widely Democratic and has been for many, many generations. I think that, obviously they, forgive the car alarm here. I think that, they obviously leave a seat on council for Republicans and in this case, independents, and WFP has been impactful with the election of Kendra Brooks, and
right.
Louis O'Rourke, lost last time. I know he's going to run again this time. So, in terms of their political, impact and might in the city, it's definitely growing as folks kind of, are not, I don't want to say getting turned off to, Democratic city politics, but, are starting to realize that there's other ways to be involved in these spaces. There's other endorsements that you can get that are impactful. There's other, contributions that you can receive from, labor and other organizations, et cetera. And I think that, ultimately, she's going to stay very close to her progressive base. And by and large, most of which the WFP stands for is very much in line with who Helen is and how I think she'll govern.
Who I thought the PFT endorsed somebody. Do you know? Oh, they did. They endorsed her.
I think they did. I want to say
They endorsed her. They
I
just
haven't
endorsed her
been,
last week.
yeah, I haven't been, knee deep in all of the endorsements, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, I'd venture to say PFT probably doesn't have a better candidate that aligns with them than Helen.
That's interesting. So let me ask you this: if you know, if you don't, that's fine too. But when we talk about the major unions in the city, PFT 332, what's the municipal union?
Oh, you're talking about AFSCME.
AFSCME. Who, in your opinion, who has the best reputation for get out the vote?
Labor. Obviously, this is a blue collar city, has pretty much always been a blue collar city. There, I think, tangible pieces of legislation and policy change impact that industry more direct than probably any other industry that I can think of. In terms of what comes from City Hall directly onto the streets, I mean, you see it almost immediately. And I think, everything that labor stands for in this city, I think, they have a profound interest to be involved in these elections in a meaningful way. So I can't, as simple as that, I can't put any, other organizations or industries before labor in this city when it comes to GOTV.
So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. The other candidate that I put a pin in was Derek Green, because I do believe that Derek Green has done a lot of work as a council person, particularly to make substantive and meaningful relationships with the business community. And he has been, I think, traditionally a big advocate for diverse business in the city. Whether that gets him any votes, it should get him votes, but whether it does get him any votes is another thing altogether. I don't know whether, I'm assuming that the chamber makes an endorsement. Does the chamber make an endorsement? Maybe not, because it's a nonprofit. It might not be able to.
I don't think they do.
Yeah.
And right, if they did, I think Derek would probably be the best candidate for them. But
Yeah.
I'd also say, Derek is a good friend. We're both Manchester City football fans. So we talk all the time, and we
won't hold it against you.
one of the things that we've spoken about is, like, I think same with Sherrod. Derek is one of the most experienced people in this race. Attorney. He's a former banker, right? He's a former council member. He's worked in a variety of spaces. He also serves on the Democratic municipal elected officials throughout the country. He's got a lot of relationships. Obviously, he's a Kappa. There's just so many, affiliations that he has that, kind of bolsters his efforts. But I think the thing for Derek that is always the question is his charisma. Because I think that, us as business people that are in this space, we speak his language. We get him. We see the passion in those rooms and having those conversations, but that doesn't always translate, to voters, right? And I think that's something that he's going to have to kind of hone in on a little bit more than others, because I don't want to say he's so business friendly or business oriented that he can't do that. It's just we quite frankly just haven't seen that other side of Derek for the last few years. Right.
Besides the mayor's race, what other races should we be paying attention to?
Sure. So there's council at large races. There's going to be, I think, about 3 or 4 seats that are open. I know there were special elections this past November. Some folks that are completing the terms of former council members that are most likely going to be running again. But in terms of most impactful races, I think the at-large races are what everyone's looking at. You have Councilman Isaiah Thomas, who's great friend. I just respect him so much, as well as Kathy Gilmore Richardson, who I respect immensely. They're going to be running for re-election. Jimmy Harrity.
That went by fast.
It did. Jimmy Harrity, who won a special election. He's going to be running again. And we'll see. Those.
Who has Sherrell's seat?
Who has Anthony Phillips? Anthony Phillips.
I don't think I know him.
Yeah, so he's a really good guy. I know he was in some educational nonprofits before. I think he's a teacher by trade, but he's a really good guy. Really good guy. He's younger. I think he's in his mid-30s. But he took over for Sherrell, and thus far he's been doing a pretty solid job. Granted, there's really not much going on in City Hall right now, given all these campaigns. But yeah, everybody's got their eyes on the at-large seats. There's probably, I don't know, over 20 legitimate candidates at this point, some of which have, some decent endorsements, some of which, don't, some of which aren't raising any money, some of which aren't very serious, and some who are formidable, in my opinion. I think that, we've seen in the last few years that the at-large seats can be impactful in a different way. I think, speaking to Derek, I think he did a really good job at, being able to be engaged. Alan Dom as well, being able to be engaged without having a specific district that you represent. I think is difficult, but I think they both did a really, really good job at that. Kathy as well, Isaiah as well. So we'll see what happens in terms of Kathy and Isaiah and Jimmy being reelected. But I think that there's a lot of candidates that I think could come into their own if they were elected at large.
I'd be shocked if Kathy and Isaiah were reelected. I mean, Jimmy's, new to that seat, but obviously he's, not very new to politics, so he should have a lot of support as well. All right, so we're going to go into our second segment here and talk a little bit about you and through these rapid fire questions. So I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions, and if you can be as honest as you can in answering them, we would appreciate that. So, you ready? Is that yes?
Yes.
Okay. You don't get scared now. One word that describes you.
Caring. I care sometimes to a fault.
I love that. Best piece of advice you ever received?
Loose lips sink ships, but silence can never be repeated.
Oh, love that. A talent that you have that most people don't know about?
I play basketball pretty well.
Most people don't know that about you. Brag about that all the time. Everybody knows you know.
Really don't. They really don't know until they find out.
Okay. Until they become a witness. That's hilarious. All right. What do you consider to be your biggest success?
My son. I never in a million years thought I'd be a dad, especially this early in life, but he is 3 and he's growing, and yeah, he's my biggest success and probably will always be my biggest success. Yes.
What book has had the biggest impact on you?
Wow. Robert Greene, The Laws of Human Nature.
Oh, okay. Okay, I've heard that quite often. And then the final question is, who is your favorite musical artist?
Coltrane.
Ah, okay. Get a gold star in my book for that one. That's a fantastic. Huh?
For all moods.
I hear that. No, I hear that. Kyle Darby, thank you so much for being a part of our show today. We greatly appreciate your time as always. For the audience, thank you for being a part of the show. We look forward to continuing the discussion and keeping it going. Until the next time, take care.